Good evening, everyone. I hope you are having a wonderful, wonderful day. Today's video is maybe going to be the start of a little mini series, because this has been on my bucket list of stuff to do for quite some time now. I got to take a step back. When I was a kid, the most beautiful bicycle I had ever laid my eyes upon started being produced in the mid-90s. I now happen to be in possession of one of these beautiful pieces of artwork. It is none other than the Schwinn Homegrown. So there are a few interesting bikes floating around here, but one of my favorites is none other than my 2000 Schwinn Homegrown LTD. LTD stands for limited edition. So about a year ago, Keith actually raced this bicycle, and we honestly just threw a bunch of stuff on it to get the thing rolling. It is by no means what I would consider the way I would want this thing to be built. It was literally, he was out of a bike, he wanted to race. I had half of a bike built, and that's where we are. But I think that it is time that changed. If you're unfamiliar with the Homegrown line of mountain bikes, they were the bee's knees back in the mid-90s and the early 2000s, and were one of the last great bicycles Schwinn produced. Side note on this, so Schwinn was actually in bankruptcy court on 9/11, and that is one of the main reasons that nobody really ever heard about them going under. Schwinn is definitely no longer Schwinn. That could be an entire video. But for the purpose of this video, in my humble opinion, the Schwinn Homegrown was the last great bicycle that Schwinn ever produced, and it ran from 95 to 2001. Which, if you think about it, in the scheme of bicycles, that is a relatively short run. Even so, it has almost a cult following now. It's partially because of the branding, the ride quality, the made in America status, the best boat paint jobs. It's really a number of things, but it's really one of the only mountain bikes of that era that I know of that still has a following of this magnitude. And honestly, I think that is partially due to the fact that... What are you doing, buddy? And this is one of the few mountain bikes from that era that actually have Facebook groups, websites, a lot of stuff that is still active, and people are still seeking these American-made frames. There are a few other mountain bikes that I would kill to have in my stable, like a Fat Chance from that era. What makes the Homegrown so special, besides my sentimental value, is the usability of it, even in today's world. The bike itself is known for being a lightweight race machine, and by being built by Yeti back when Yeti was the American bike to have. Also, there's so much known about this bike that I've heard just through my years of cycling, but it's actually a little bit harder to find proof than you would think on the Googles. From what I've heard, at least, was that less than 500 of these bikes were actually made by Yeti, and only the highest end models. The rest were actually made in the States, but by other companies. I think one company was called Anodizing Aluminum or something. So all of the Homegrowns are, to my knowledge, made in the USA. That's another awesome little feature about it. Contrary to popular belief, not all of them are made by Yeti. It was only the highest end models, I think. And this frame, it actually weighs 2.9 pounds, which is, I mean, that's pretty good. I mean, you also have to remember that this thing is 20 years old. A modern bike that weighs that much for the frame is good. The big deal with the Schwinn hardtails were the epicenter seat stays. Ooh, fancy. So they were actually designed to counteract the flex from the brakes of the time, the V-brakes, and that's also meant that it would allow for 700C or 27.5-inch wheels to go on this thing. I do need to clarify why I think this bike is definitely a GOAT. It is the greatest of all time. What made me originally start thinking this is predominantly because of the age of the bike. So it's 20 years old. There's still people that when they come in, they're like, oh my God, that is an old Schwinn Homegrown, isn't it? Man, that thing is beautiful. If you look at the bikes that were from that era, so you've got something like the GT, the Zhejiang, that was a super cool bike. Like I said, the Cannondale Super V. Fat Chances are still pretty sought after as well. There's a bunch of bicycles from that era that people would still love to have in a collection. This is one of the only ones that I still see people buying to build, to ride. And what I think it has over all those other bikes is its ability to be so many things. It still rides surprisingly well for a bike of this age. And I believe if I do it correctly, it'll ride super good for a modern bicycle. That's why I think this is the greatest of all time. Because of the age of the bike, because you can still ride and race this thing, as we have showed with Keith.
Yeah, Keith, you're catching him.
And this, my friends, is what leads me to the dilemma that I am currently facing. I want to get this thing back to riding status. The current setup is a hodgepodge of parts that were just thrown on it when Keith didn't have a bike to race, and we just, you know, like I said, built this thing for him super quick. But I'm at a crossroads. I can do so many things with this bike, and I would seriously love everybody's input on what you think I should do with this bicycle. I can make it into some gravel monster crossing style bike, which actually be kind of cool. I can restore it to as close to original as possible. I can put 27.5-inch wheels on it. Like, there's a lot of freaking options. And honestly, I'm leaning more towards doing disc brakes on it, putting 27.5 wheels and making it a dedicated single speed that I could potentially break out for a race or two. The big dilemma with this bike though, with putting brakes, what is this? But the big deal with this bike, it has some very odd brake mounts for the rear disc rotor. The front I'm not worried about. The front I can just put a fork on that's got modern disc mounts on it and we're ready to go. But the back has something that has been lost in time. It is the Hayes 22 mount. I don't know if the Hayes brakes back then worked, but nobody uses this mount. So I'm gonna have to figure out a way to fabricate something so I can mount it to the Hayes 22 mount to mount a disc brake too. I know there's a lot of options out there. One company I think called like A to Z Components or something made an adapter for a while. It's such a specific purpose. I don't expect anybody to continuously make something for a bike that's 20 years old. Either way, let me know what you think I should be doing with this thing. Let me know down below. And I'm going to start working on the next installment of this video. It'll probably be maybe a few weeks before I can work on another Schwinn Homegrown video, mainly because I need to get my ducks in a row and I need to figure out what I'm gonna do with it. I need to figure out how I'm gonna fabricate something for that brake, or actually I'm gonna figure out who to ask about how to do it. One thing I would like to do is actually find a period specific Fox fork to go on this thing. Now I don't know if this is the right frame of thinking, but I could get a modern 27.5-inch fork to go on here, but those forks, they're new. They're made for a 27.5-inch frame. You get what I'm saying? An old Fox, like a Fox 32 that was made for a 26-inch bike, actually accepts 27.5-inch tires and wheels up to about a 2.2. I've done experiments with this and I know it to be true. So I would think if I put on a fork like that, it would keep the geometry where it needs to be. That's kind of where I'm going with that. So if you have any suggestions on what to do, what not to do with this, let me know. But that's the direction I'm moving in. I'm really looking forward to it. I really want to actually see how this thing does in a fast situation. I will see everyone in the next video. It's gonna be kind of cool because it's gonna be the first time I've ever truly ridden an e-bike. We're gonna test one out at the local mountain island trails. So stick around for that. Make sure you like and subscribe, and I will see everyone in the next video. I love you all. Bye-bye.